Good afternoon, everyone. We're about to get started. All right, our producer is just getting us in line with one last thing. Be ready to go. All right. Good evening, and welcome to the Iran War Monitor. I'm Greg Roman, Executive Director of the Middle East Forum. Over the past 48 hours, the war between Israel and Iran has entered a new phase and more intense phase. Okay, hold on. It looks like I'm not connected, guys. Sorry. Gonna reconnect. Okay, there we go. Enough. Let's get rid of that stinger that's on top from the media and replace it with the regular screen. Again, everybody, sorry for the kinks. We're just getting into this. As much as the war is unrolling, so is our live broadcasting, but we will get it right by next week. Here we go. And if anybody on the chat can just see if they can hear me, be very helpful. I guess I sound like the Iran war mongerer, not the war monitor. Thank you, Robert, for your feedback. All right, everybody can hear me. So I guess you can't see my pretty face, but that's not why you're here. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Iran War Monitor. I'm Greg Roman, Executive Director of the Middle East Forum. Over the past 48 hours, the war between Israel and Iran has entered a new and more intense phase. After a week of decapitation strikes that shattered the command structure of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, we now find ourselves in a position with Operation Rising Lion having pivoted. It's no longer just about killing generals. It's now in a position where the focus and its objective is the systematic dismantlement of the regime's military-industrial heart. We are now witnessing a campaign of industrial attrition, targeting the factories, workshops, and research centers that build and sustain Iran's nuclear and missile programs. The Iranian regime, hollowed out and facing a cascade of failures, is responding with increasingly desperate and dangerous retaliatory strikes and a propaganda war aimed at its own people. Let's begin with the kinetic activity. On June 19th and 20th, the Israeli Air Force conducted its most extensive and complex air operations to date. In a single 24-hour period, the IDF confirmed that over 50 of its fighter jets struck dozens of targets, demonstrating near total air superiority over the country. The strikes were geographically widespread, indicating a comprehensive effort to degrade Iran's war-making capabilities from the ground up. In and around the capital, Tehran, we now find ourselves looking at an entirely different kind of air war, with the bombardment being relentless. Early this morning, June 20th, residents in Karaj, just west of Tehran, were woken by a series of intense explosions. Our sources confirm strikes on the Big Nageh and Raja Shamit garrisons in Malard, and multiple hits in the vicinity of Payan Airport, a site with known links to Iran's military logistics. Tehran itself, the targeting has been precise. On June 19th, the strike hit Masil Bakhtar Street near Basij Ashur Operational Battalion Base. And yesterday, a drone attack struck a residential building in the Gisha neighborhood, taking out the upper floors of a building that also housed the bakery. But what they didn't say was also a safe house for a nuclear scientist responsible for the weaponization of Iran's nuclear program. The campaign has reached far beyond the capital. In northern Iran, Israeli fighters attacked the Sefi Drud industrial town in Gilan province, a strike that came after the IDF issued a specific evacuation warning for the area. And in Tabriz, home of the Ahmad missile facility, multiple explosions were reported on the evening of June 19th into the early morning hours of June 20th. In the south, in the afternoon of June 20th, strikes hit the city of Avaz, targeting the IRGC's Karbala base and the 4th Lion garrison. Shortly after, the Bushehr air base was also hit, perhaps preparing for a strike on the Bushehr nuclear reactor. This nationwide campaign has a clear strategic objective: to destroy not just the weapons, but the entire industrial chain that produces them. And that brings us to the core of this new phase, targeting the production chain. The IDF has explicitly confirmed that strikes on sites producing raw materials and components for surface-to-surface missiles are now part of the Israeli target bank. Crucially, they also confirmed a direct hit on the headquarters of the SPND, the Organization of Defensive Innovation and Research. To be clear, the SPND is the institutional heart of Iran's nuclear weaponization efforts. This is the brain of the bomb-making program. This was also corroborated by independent reports from the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency. And also in another significant update, the agency confirmed that Israeli strikes damaged 2 key centrifuge production facilities, a workshop in Karaj and a research facility in Tehran. These are the factories that built the machines for uranium enrichment. When you combine these actions, striking centrifuge workshops, raw material production, and the weaponization leadership at the SPND, the strategic logic is undeniable. This is a systemic effort to permanently dismantle the entirety of Iran's nuclear enterprise. But as its military infrastructure crumbles, the Iranian regime's response has grown reckless. On June 19th, the IDF reported that Iran fired a ballistic missile armed with a cluster munition warhead towards central Israel. Yesterday, another ballistic missile struck the southern Israeli city of Beersheba, landing near residential buildings and causing significant damage and injuries. The use of cluster munitions, inaccurate and indiscriminate, with weapons banned by over 100 countries, especially when used to target civilian infrastructure, is a dangerous escalation. It is the act of a regime that is losing its capacity for precision and is resorting to terror weapons against civilian populations. At the same time, with its credibility collapsing, the regime has turned its propaganda machine against its own. On June 20th, Iranian state television broadcasted footage of an Israeli strike that occurred 4 days earlier on the Bakari town of Shikar. They presented the old footage as new, successful Iranian missile attack on Israel. They even removed the original audio of Iranians speaking to complete the deception. This attempt to lie to the Iranian people, conducted under the cover of a nationwide internet blackout, is a stark admission of failure. The regime cannot report on its own successes, so it must invent them by replaying footage of its own destruction. Perhaps nothing better illustrates the state of the nation than an event that occurred on the evening of June 20th. At approximately 9:19 p.m. local time, a 5.5 magnitude earthquake struck northern Iran. The tremor was felt across at least a dozen provinces, including in Tehran, Karaj, and Qom. For several minutes, the immediate reaction of the Iranian people, as expressed by the few people available on social media, was not that it was an earthquake. They assumed that it was a massive coordinated bombing run. Many believed it was the much anticipated American strike on the Fordow nuclear facility. After a week of relentless airstrikes, the population is so psychologically conditioned to expect destruction from the sky that the ground shaking beneath their feet is interpreted as just another phase of war. The incident, though natural, laid bare the terror that now defines the life of the regime in Iran, invited by the Ayatollahs at top. The last 48 hours mark a significant turning point. Israel's air campaign has shifted from decapitation to systematic industrial and military attrition. The regime, hollowed out and unable to mount a coherent defense, is left with increasingly reckless missile attacks and transparently false propaganda. The nationwide internet blackout is a clear admission that it has lost control of the narrative and fears its own people. This earthquake, while a natural event, serves as a powerful metaphor for a nation that is being shaken to its foundations, unable to rely on the Islamic Revolution that has ruled the country for the past 46 years. What Israel needs from the United States and what President Trump should provide is a non-kinetic white picket fence around the entire battle space. The American role is not to fight Israel's war, but to ensure Israel has the freedom to win it and to accelerate the regime's collapse through other means. This is something that we've been looking at the Middle East Forum for the past 6 months as part of our Iran Freedom Project, and we thought we would share some of our conclusions with you this afternoon, before we get into our panel. First, diplomatic. We must use all American power at the UN to block any and all calls for a ceasefire that would save the Ayatollah. We must isolate the regime and its apologists on the world stage. Second, military support. We believe that we should continue to provide Israel with the intelligence and munitions it needs to prosecute its campaign. Keep American forces in the region on high alert as a powerful deterrent against any third party considering intervention. Third, information warfare. Amplify the truth. Expose the regime's lies, like the fake missile attack video. Give a platform to the voices of freedom inside Iran and ensure that the message gets out, bypassing the regime's internet blackout. Fourth, psychological warfare. Directly message the wavering elements of the IRGC and the Iranian bureaucracy. Let them know the regime is finished and that there is a path for those who abandon the sinking ship. The mere presence and readiness of U.S. forces, from the Doomsday Plane to carrier strike groups, is a powerful tool. The threat of American intervention can force capitulation without firing a single shot. More so, economic warfare using the full might of the U.S. Treasury, like earlier today when more Iranian companies and companies doing business with Iran were sanctioned, must be used to cripple what's left of Iran's economy. Target the remaining access to global financial markets. Seventh, tighten the existing sanction regime into a complete stranglehold. And lastly, trade isolation. Pressure remaining trade partners, especially China, to cut all economic ties. Make it clear that doing business with this dying regime is a liability that they don't want to attach to their balance sheet. While Israel does not need American direct kinetic help, we must remember that they are our ally, and the Islamic Republic of Iran is our sworn enemy. Therefore, if, and only if, Prime Minister Netanyahu makes a formal request for direct military assistance to destroy a target like the hardened Fordow facility, President Trump must seriously consider it. It is a moral imperative to stand with our allies against genocidal tyrants, and it is the strategic imperative to ensure that an enemy of the United States, which has chanted death to America for 45 years, is permanently disarmed. We're now going to go to our first interview with Gadir Mari, a former member of Israeli Knesset, who now runs the Middle East Forum's Eastern Mediterranean Security Project, but has a unique perspective on this, not just having served as a member of Israel's parliament, but also having been in the position of serving as Israel's first Druze female member of parliament, a member of the World Economic Forum's Davos Youth Leadership Group, and a former Jewish agency shlicha, or emissary, to the United States. Gadir brings a unique perspective. Gadir, welcome to this afternoon's broadcast.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you for having me.
Gadir, you worked in parliament during a relative time of peace. And now we see the Knesset for the past 8 days meeting with the Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee, making some critical budget-making decisions. But the role of a wartime member of Knesset versus a peacetime member of Knesset have two very different responsibilities and job descriptions.
That's right.
What's it like to be a member of Knesset with your friends who are still serving there? And what are they being asked to do to serve Israel in their country?
Great question. Thank you. So once upon a time, it sounds like history, 9 days ago, the Knesset was almost ready to go to an early election. Who would imagine that last Wednesday we had a bill at the Knesset regarding the ultra-Orthodox sector drafting into army, which was a problematic, severe division among Israeli public. There was very active discussion among leadership and citizens. And we remember Prime Minister Netanyahu hurried up to talk with every ultra-Orthodox leader hold your horses. There is a momentum. We are in a sensitive time, and wait and see, because I need stable government. I need functioning government and parliament, because we are heading to a war. Now we understand that he talked to ministers from the ultra-Orthodox sector, and he succeeded in that, to stabilize the political arena and to launch this war from a strong position. It's fascinating, Greg, to see that all attention, all energy, all focus among every legislator in Israel is now the war. Iran, Iran, Iran. They left aside every bill regarding the Supreme Court status, regarding the drafting of the ultra-Orthodox sector, regarding the communication system, and everyone focusing on that, understanding that we are in a different time. With all respect to Hamas and their rockets, we are dealing with Iran with 3,000 missiles, as you know, although we are succeeding to intercept more than 90% of these missiles, but there are casualties. We are talking about 24 Israelis who were killed, 1,800 who were injured, 180 are still hospitalized, and more than 9,000 Israelis who are evacuees. So it requires all attention, all focus. I have been following the interviews that even opposition leaders are delivering to Israeli media outlets, to international outlets. Lapid, Gantz, Lieberman, Bennett, everyone is saying there is a broad consensus, understanding that this is an unavoidable war. This is a war of necessity, and it was crucial to create this consensus. And some people are even asking more than that. Let us form a broad unity government. I don't see that happening for now, but all legislators now are dedicated to one thing: Iran.
Now, the responsibility isn't just about preparing to achieve Israel's wartime goals, but it's also to ensure that Israel is able to function as a state. And there's been some news that has come out. Earlier today, Maersk, the global shipping giant, said that it was stopping shipments to the port of Haifa. There has been a global air, not blockade, but a cessation of operations with airplanes besides Sundaor, Arkia, and El Al, Israeli national carriers, willing to land at Ben Gurion Airport. It seems that day after day, even though Israel's having more strategic success, the home front is becoming isolated, with Israelis maybe able to use national airlines to go to and from the country. But it seems as if there's some critical infrastructure and access by port is not going forward. So what is Israel doing to attenuate its circumstances, or to adjust its circumstances to be able to deal with these new civilian realities and hardships during a time of war? And how is the Knesset helping that?
Yeah. So reminding ourselves that although the, I would say, grandiose, imaginary first hours and days of huge success of these achievements that we succeeded to have earlier than predicted, we understand that geographically Israel is a tiny country in this hostile, crazy neighborhood called Middle East, in this complex geopolitics. And we understand that there are so much complex ramifications of this war, reminding ourselves that first days we had 100,000 till 150,000 Israelis who found themselves stuck abroad. We are working, Greg, on the important initiative, the 3+1, with Cyprus, with Greece, that proved itself, and suddenly these countries became safe hub for all Israelis that were concentrated. They felt safe at synagogues, at hotels, and then we are bringing them back home to Israel. So yes, there are logistics. There are so many layers of cooperation beyond IDF, working with civil society, working with the regional players, with global allies, in order to conduct this war in the most successful way.
Now, in your opinion, we've heard about Jewish community support for Israel, but you've also spent a significant amount of time, just as you mentioned, speaking with the Cypriot American community, the Greek American community. Even in some instances, you've been able to speak with other diaspora groups, Hindu Americans, others that are really involved in trying to provide support for Israel during this time. What do you see at the state level? What's the country of Greece, the country of Cyprus, the Indian government, other areas that are sort of in Israel's not near theater, but that second layer of countries surrounding Israel's Arab neighbors? What kind of support are they providing? And is there anything that they're doing to help Israel's civil situation?
So unlike the war in Gaza, this war is different. Iran has many enemies in the region, in the globe. They understand, both in the covert, overt, declarative level, all leadership understand, Greg, that we are here saving the world. It's beyond the narrow prism of Israeli national interest. We are here, as the Chancellor of Germany, Merz, mentioned, Israel is doing the dirty work for the globe, understanding that as we did, as we saved the globe in 1981 by eliminating the nuclear threat from Iraq, as we did in 2007 when we eliminated the threat of nuclear project in Syria in Bashar's hands. So people understand, the leadership understand here that we are doing the dirty work. Even when you see the response of China, like it was of the protocol, just declaring that we are asking or calling for ceasefire, de-escalation, you would expect more common sense. But it was when I was reading those actions, it was like it was written by Jerusalem. So many international bodies, regional allies and not allies yet, they understand that here we are doing great work for the region and for the world.
Now, you come from Dayatha Carmel, a Druze city right outside of Haifa. There have been several Iranian attacks on the north of Israel, hitting the Haifa refinery, some other towns, the loss of almost an entire family in a Arab-Israeli town in the Krayot, in the neighborhoods right outside of Haifa. How is the Druze community dealing with this crisis?
I believe, like every Israeli, it reignited our national pride, Greg, that we are back again as the regional superpower, as the rising lion. Post-October 7th, the fatal mistake of Sinwar, what he did on October 7th, the ramifications of what he did are fascinating. They are playing against any interest of the Palestinian, of any enemy of Israel. Who would imagine that every proxy Iran invested very hard and equipped and trained is out of this game? If you would tell me that Beirut would send signals to Hamas, to Hezbollah, even don't consider joining this war, I would see it's a dramatic opening item. Even the Iraqi militias, all the Houthis suddenly are saying, okay, we believe Iran could handle that alone. So we are dealing with different new Middle East that reshaped itself. We are dealing with a weakened axis. And here it's a great opportunity for Israel to build this new architecture, new Middle East, a stable decade, maybe expanding Abraham Accords. There are so many positive signals of what is happening. I call it, Greg, the creative / the constructive chaos. And history taught us that from this chaos, I believe, we would see great opportunities for Israel.
Dear, thank you very much, and I hope you'll stay with us for our panel. I'd like to bring in MEF Zand, an Iranian-American journalist and also one of the co-founders of the Iranian-American anti-Ayatollah group, the Alliance Against Islamic Regime of Iran Apologists, IRA. Now, MEF, I'm going to probably not say the acronym the correct way, but you have a unique perspective here because for years, you have been trying to get accountability from the regime. And now all of a sudden, in the last 8 days, there's an opportunity for Iranian Americans, for the Iranian diaspora, for those who have opposed the regime for more than or close to 46 years, to perhaps see a ray of light, to see this as an opportunity to adjust Western opinion about what's going on. This could be a catalytic event that might start a revolution or a counter-revolution against the Ayatollahs. I'd like to know what you're hearing from the ground, even though it's very hard to get access because of the almost near internet blackout in Iran right now. But how are the Iranian people responding to this calamity that's going on with the regime?
Well, thank you for inviting me today and including me on the panel. I'd like to start out by explaining the fact that there is a huge amount of outcry by not only the diaspora but people inside Iran who are adamant, and I stand with that. I stand with them in being adamant in the fact that Iran is the nation of Iran. It's the people of Iran. The Khomeiniist regime, however, is the Khomeiniist regime, and the fact of the matter is that the biggest victims of the Khomeiniist regime in the past 46 plus years have been the Iranian people who have been slaughtered in the millions and continue to be executed and continue to be assassinated, tortured, and so on. The fact is that one of the things that everybody is insistent in explaining, and for the people in the world to know, is the fact that in the Shia version of the story, Islam is the nation. So you could be an American Shia and you are a part of the nation. Iran, in and of itself, is just a staging position.
But Nefsha, what I'm really trying to focus on here, and I really want to get to narrow it down on this, is what's happening on the ground. There's been no information coming out, and we're really hoping you can give us that perspective.
Well, that's the thing. The thing is that people are coming together in the fact that everybody's being very kind to each other. Everybody's helping out each other. But everybody's afraid. Everybody's shocked. Nobody knows what the outcome of anything is going to be. They haven't experienced this since 1988. The last time they were bombed and attacked was in the Iran-Iraq war that lasted for 8 years. And so there's a whole new generation of people who have never experienced anything like this. There is very little food on the ground in terms of, for example, a flour shortage. As you recall, prior to the beginning of Rising Lion, there was a big truck strike, as well as various other strikes. So for things like flour were not coming into the city. Right now, we're hearing stories about, 10 people going into a bakery to buy bread, and some of them need 5 pieces of bread. Other people need 3 pieces of bread. And the baker says, I only have 13 pieces of bread. And everybody says, the first person says, okay, I give up my piece of bread for the next person, and then the next person. But then everybody gets 1 piece of bread, and everybody gives a group hug, and everybody's happy, and everybody goes home with at least the 1 piece of bread.
So this hunger in these examples can only go on for so long. Are
Yes.
Iranian people blaming their government?
Yes.
Are they being propagated to in terms of or unduly influenced by the government, saying this is Israel's fault? Where are they casting blame?
They're casting blame on the regime, because the regime is not providing. For example, when you're in Israel, at least you have the sirens. You know that there's going to be a hit in 3 minutes' time. Here's a place where you can go and hide. The Khomeiniist regime has not provided any such thing. They have not provided any relief. There is no place for people to hide. They do not allow people to connect with each other. They have actually even blocked Elon Musk's Starlink. So there is absolutely no form of communication. The landlines have even been cut. So unless you are able to connect with the person who lives next door to you, nobody knows from 1 minute to the next what's happening. The streets are a complete ghost town. The stores are all closed. And basically it is from one moment to the next, people sticking their heads out of the window and seeing what is flying over their heads. And that's how they're living. Is
this the uncertain quiet before the storm of a counter-revolution against the Islamic Republic?
It is, but then there's the issue of the fact that the people don't know how many, so if you're not getting any news, you don't know which one of the IRGC command or the Basij or the regime's mullah leadership is still standing. Who's giving orders? Are they going to ask the IRGC to pour out into the streets to beat up on anyone who goes out to protest? And they have been, whoever has protested, in fact, has been not only attacked, but they've also been dragged to prison. And I'll tell you one other thing too, Greg. People who are protesting in places like London are being beaten by groups of hoodlums who are coming and beating them up. And one person's leg was broken severely today in front of the Iranian embassy in London.
Right. Nefsha, thank you very much for that report. We're now going to look at the picture in Washington, D.C. and the last announcement by President Donald Trump, focusing on Caroline Leavitt, the White House press secretary's statement yesterday that the president has given Iran 2 weeks to find a diplomatic solution to this problem. Now we're going to like to welcome on Michael Rubin, Director of Policy Analysis for the Middle East Forum, to tell us about what this latest development means for Washington's decision on how and when to intervene in Iran.
Hey, thank you, Greg. First of all, I want to clear up one common misconception with regard to this 2 weeks. Donald Trump hasn't given them a 2-week pause. He's given them up to 2 weeks, which in a way is typical Donald Trump. He is saying one thing, people are hearing another. But whether you like Donald Trump or dislike Donald Trump, he's very smart and he knows how to use his words. And in this case, I do very much want to focus on the fact that he said up to 2 weeks. So he's going to be waiting to see whether Iran is showing good faith. At the same time, I suspect more American assets will be in place, both to defend our forces overseas and perhaps to help Israel complete any mission it needs to complete.
And one of the things that you've mentioned in your writing and some of your public remarks is that the U.S. will get serious when they start withdrawing their aircraft carriers into the Indian Ocean. They've talked about the addition now of a third carrier strike group, the USS USS Gerald Ford, along with the Carl Vinson and the Nimitz that are there. What's the situation in terms of the current deployment of U.S. forces, and how is this factoring into the regime's behavior? Have you seen anything noticeable in terms of them moving assets around, talking about closing the Strait of Hormuz and the other sort of asymmetrical operations that they've been planning? What's the regime's response to this increase in U.S. force deployment in the Middle East?
Well, first of all, when it comes to U.S. deployments in the Middle East, what the top line isn't simply where the Navy is, it's actually where our aircraft are, because satellite imagery has shown that all our aircraft have disappeared from Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar. The question then becomes, have they disappeared from the Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar because Qatar has forbade the United States from utilizing their territory to attack Iran, at which point we need to have very serious discussion about where Qatar actually sits in all this? Or is the United States simply removing our forces because we want to ensure that they are out of range of the Iranians? A good way to actually check this would be to check on the U.S. deployments in Bahrain, for example, which is just as close to Iran. And remember, back in 1991, we had 4 times as many aircraft in Bahrain involved in Operation Desert Storm than we did in Qatar. When it comes to the Navy, look, our whole goal is going to be to ensure that we can strike at Iran, but they can't strike back at us asymmetrically. But when it comes to your question about where exactly Iran's forces are, look, I not being there right now, I can't give you the specifics. However, what we need to be looking at are 2 things. First of all, whether the Iranian forces, especially the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, are moving some of their provincial units into Tehran. Because whenever the Iranian government historically thinks that they face a popular uprising, they are going to abandon the periphery in favor of maintaining security in the capital. That's the type of movement we need to see if it's happening. And if they start withdrawing their forces to the capital, is that a green light for any sort of popular uprising or ethnic insurgency, especially in the Kurdish or the Baluchi zones? The other issue that we need to look at is with regard to the Iranian army, because of course, Iran has 2 militaries. The Iranian army is in charge of territorial defense. It's a conscript army. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps is in charge of defense of the revolution, which means its enemies can be either external or internal. We haven't really seen much indication that the Iranian army is yet involved in this. And one of the reasons why that might be true is simply because the regime doesn't trust fully the Iranian army, since they tend to be much more representative of the people, and the people are at best ambivalent. One thing that many of our writers at the Middle East Forum have observed, Greg, is that back in 2019, during those waves of protests, and then perhaps also in 2022, during the Woman Life Freedom protests, the numbers of Iranians killed by security forces far exceed even what the official figures are now in Iran for Iranians killed during the Israeli strikes. And that's an irony which many Iranians have picked up on, that they've been safer with Israel bombing them than they have been when the regime tries to crack down on them themselves.
Now, there's this idea that has been spoken about on American media and also in some European outlets that there is no organized opposition in Iran to rise up against the regime. I'd like you to comment on whether that's a true or false statement, and maybe just address the broader question that if conditions get so bad in Iran that the people do rise up en masse, what's that going to look like? And is there the possibility to have, as Gadir talked about, controlled chaos? Or is this going to be something that's going to spin out of control?
Well, Greg, one of I'll answer this in a couple different ways, if I may. One, what the Trump administration seems to be thinking is, and one of the reasons why they're opposing the Israeli declared goal to get rid of, to assassinate Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, the supreme leader of Iran, is because the Trump administration believes it would be much better for Iran's long-term stability to actually force Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei to sign a surrender, and perhaps even to sign a surrender in favor of a provisional council to fill the vacuum. There is a fear in Washington that if Khamenei is killed and if Mujtaba, his son, is killed, that this could set off a free-for-all. Now, understanding Iranian history, the fact that there is not one single unified figure is not necessarily a bad thing. Between 1905 and 1921 or so, Iran had experienced a constitutional revolution, and it was Iran's first and only real episode in its history of parliamentary democracy. What many Iranians point out is that during that constitutional revolution period, at the beginning of the 20th century, Iran also didn't have any single charismatic Iranian figure, and that itself was what allowed democracy to exist. Now, practically speaking, we've got a situation where you're going to go from a theocratic dictatorship to ideally a democracy of some sort. But what comes in between, and that's actually a valid problem. Now, one of the big concerns about what will come in between is that the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, which has both the weaponry and the resources, might rally and establish some sort of military dictatorship. Now, practically speaking, if this turned into a military dictatorship like what we have in Egypt, that is a dictatorship that doesn't threaten other countries, a dictatorship that doesn't kill Jews, that may be an interim, an acceptable interim period for the neighboring states of Iran, for the United States, and perhaps even for Israel. If, however, the ideologues within the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps simply replace Khamenei with an equally ideological military dictator, that would be, of course, negative. However, I don't think that situation will happen simply because the same forces that are being defeated as Israel bombs the regime now will also be delegitimized, and I think would much more likely cut and run. But we will see. One of the things to also watch is what happens to many of the more established groups that have long claimed legitimacy. Does the emperor have no clothes? And the Mujahideen al-Haq, for example, has seemed to rapidly go quiet, to disappear. We haven't seen as much activity as perhaps we should from Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi. I have no doubt that he actually has supporters inside Iran. At the same time, he seems to be a little bit reticent, a little bit afraid of asserting himself. I see the same pattern in Reza Pahlavi that I did previously in Prince Hassan of Jordan, when it was once debated whether he should take some sort of role overseeing a constitutional convention upon Saddam Hussein's fall. We also have published something in the Middle East Forum Observer today, Greg, looking at what is going on in Iranian Kurdistan, because the Kurds are among the most organized groups, but the Kurds aren't showing any particular unity, and people are basically scared. One final point I would make, which also helps explain why is no one rising up. You know, one of the amazing things about the Islamic Revolution back in 1979 is a full 10% of the population of Iran took part in it. And this is before, of course, the age of social media. Now, in comparison, only 1% of Americans took part in the American Revolution. 2% of Frenchmen and Russians took part in the French Revolution and the Bolshevik Revolution. So this was amazing, the sheer mobilization of Iranians. Ayatollah Khomeini promised everyone an Islamic democracy. What they got was neither, but they got a war that killed 1 million people. And so many Iranians are very, very reticent. And they also worry that in today's climate, that the outside world really hasn't made any promises to them and may simply stand by and allow the Islamic Republic to regroup. And again, there's a parallel here to Iraq when on February 15th, 1991, George H.W. Bush at a campaign stop in Ohio called upon the Iraqi people to rise up and throw off the dictator Saddam. And they did, only to have the Republican Guard respond by massacring people in the streets. So ultimately, the Iranians are being very, very cautious. But at the same time, we talk about zombie regimes that have lost all legitimacy. The Islamic Republic has lost all legitimacy, and at this point, I don't think it can recover.
Thank you, Michael Rubin, Director of Policy Analysis for Middle East Forum. Hopefully you'll stay for our panel with some of our questions later on. I'd like to now change the order around a little bit enough, and I'd like to bring on Shukriya Bradost, coming to us from Virginia. Shukriya has a pretty eclectic background, attorney, academic, activist, but I think for the purpose of this discussion, a Middle East security expert from Iranian Kurdistan. Shukriya, you just heard Michael said that the Kurdish population in Iran is not maybe organizing as much as it had in past instances. Perhaps it is, but we don't know about it. Could you offer us a clarifying position on exactly what the Kurds in Iran are doing right now as Israeli fighter jets fly over their territory to strike Tehran and Tabriz and other Iranian cities?
Thank you, Greg. Thank you for having me, and thank you for putting together this timely panel. You started with a very great question. Kurds are not silent, or they're not mobilizing, not preferring. They actually busy with that. I'm one of the people that I'm working with all Kurdish parties. We had a just meeting yesterday. We've been working together to know what would the best time for Kurds to act, to show their power. Why they are waiting, why they're not that much public, because based on the previous experience, they know that Islamic regimes always trying to see the Kurds, the portrayed Kurds as enemy of the Iran territorial integrity, the way we saw it even the first day when this regime came to the power in 1979, when Kurdish groups, they control all the Kurdish region. Then Khomeini was the one, he declared jihad against Kurd. Imagine, he's recorded in the history of the Muslim history, the first leader declaring jihad against his own Muslim population. When he declared jihad, it wasn't just a word of jihad that no one followed. Unfortunately, his jihad, his statement was followed around Iran, other part against Kurdish region. And I have all collected data because it's one of my research and the future book that I'm working on data. It shows all the Qom, Tehran, Shiraz, Isfahan, all these cities, because of the religious ideology following Khomeini. We can argue about the reason behind that. Even they fall for the regime's propaganda that's Kurd trying to take part of Iran. They are trying to against Iran, as I said, territorial integrity. But at the end, they mobilized, they came to Kurdistan, and they fought against Kurds. They killed more than 12,000 of the Kurds in Iran and war against the Kurdish population. One of them who become the commander of the IRGC was, and the Quds Force was Qasem Soleimani. He was just 30 years old. No one knew about him. He came to Kurdistan, and most of the IRGC commanders who been killed, eliminated by Israel in this war, most of them, they had the experience of fighting against Kurd in Kurdistan. So that what I'm bringing that background. That background tells you, whenever Iranian regime is weak, they trying to mobilize the rest of the country against the Kurd. You will ask me why Kurds, but not other region in Iran, because Kurds have a strong capability to mobilize against central government. And why they have this strong capability to mobilize against government? Because they never ever seen the central government as their government. The definition we have in academia about the governments as the governments, the responsibility, the governments is an actor whose responsibility to protect you, to provide you your needs, your security. And what is the definition of this government? The central government.
What I want to really focus on, though, is
sure.
if the Kurds are ready to rise up, but there's a fear that you might have a repeat of what happened years ago, leading to the deaths of many Iranian Kurds. What event needs to take place? Is it an Israeli airstrike? Is it sending weapons and arms to the Kurds? Is it communicating to Kurdish areas? Is it a relationship between outside opposition groups like the Komalis Party or others saying, the PJAK saying, hey guys, let's go. We're crossing the Iraqi border into Iran. We'll all fight together. What has to happen for the Kurds to rise up? And similarly, Baluchis with other groups, maybe acting in concert together with other anti-regime Persians. What event needs to take place, or series of events needs to take place over the next few days and weeks for that to happen, if it's to happen at all?
First, Kurds have to wait passionately to a strategic way to see how the regime military wing, military power will be diminished. Because if you keep the regime's military power strong and you bring Kurd as we have a Kurd as the only mobilized, organized military power they have in Iran. So you bring them, definitely they will be defeated by Islamic regime, by Iranian regime. So that's the first phase of when they're going to engage. We have to double check and make sure Kurd not going to be killed by Iranian regime's military. So first we have to see how much Israel is going to diminish this military power. For second part of the question about the opposition, the future, because there is an important point here. Israel cannot leave Iran like that, because you're not leaving your enemy weakened and injured and leave them like that for the future, make Iran stronger against Israel. Why? Because previously Iran regime didn't have an excuse to attack Israel. Being always opposite or strongly criticized by the population, they keep saying, why we have to fight against Israel? We have no border, we have no problem, no dispute. Why we have to fight Israel? And right now, if Israel leave Iran like that, for the future, the regime has an argument now. Yeah, we have to attack Israel. So now you leave the enemy to become a stronger enemy in the future and threat. So in this case, I'm going back to answer your question. So your decision should be changing the regime. But for the opposition, how Kurds coming to unite with other opposition or the future government, they are waiting to see who is going to be the most powerful group to join them or to have a coalition with them. Do we see the outside opposition as an ally, as a group that we can have this coalition with them? I can tell you there are the group, but they are not the group Kurds want to be with them. There is a reason.
Is it possible for Iranian Kurds to unify? And if so, can these groups work together against the regime? Because right now there's many different factions within the Kurdish Iranian community.
Yeah, as I told you in the beginning of my statement, there are meetings between all Kurdish groups. I'm the one of them. All of the groups, all of the Kurdish groups. There is a meeting going on right now. They are trying to bring together all their power together, because that's how they learn from the other part of the Kurdistan's region in Syria and Iraq. They know there is experience, there is a background, how you have to work together. Otherwise, your weakness is enemy's powerful card. So that's how we as a people, we've been working as independent people who work with all different political parties. we're trying to have a new coalition among all Kurdish parties. That's what we're working on, and it's been successful till now, I'm telling you. But we're going to have a coalition with other Iranian parties. I cannot promise that. Why? Because if you look at for instance, the Pahlavis, the strong voice in the media. I'm not sure about the population inside Iran, but inside the U.S. media and U.S. Some groups, he has a support. Even in Iran, he has a support, but we don't have the data about how strong is that support inside Iran. But they group don't have the plan or the program for the Kurds and other ethnic groups to bring them under the same coalition. When you are not in power yet and you're threatening ethnic groups with the massacre, with the torturing in the future, you cannot have them as your partner. So first you have to change your rhetoric, show us the guarantee that you're not going to do the same as your father did, after your father Khomeini did. So what is the guarantee? Why the Baluch and Kurds have to join that kind of the coalition? That's why we have to wait, because we know in the future, if Kurds want to be the starting group of the changing the regime, bringing their military power or the mobilization, which is the easiest part of Iran can mobilize quickly, is the Kurdish population. We saw that in a Women Life Freedom uprising. You saw, I'm sure most of your audience seen that videos when all Kurdish city they had a protest, they had a strong protest against the Islamic regime. What happened then? Labeling Kurd as a terrorist, as a separatist, as an enemy of the national security, which is not new. It's been in the Iranian books, history book even. If you ask me when that started, securitization of Kurds, that's my expertise, I will tell you that started when the Shia Safavid Empire controlled power in Iran. If you go back to their book during the history, you can find in 1609, 17th century, in their book, they talking about we have to kill this enemy, this animal called Kurds. The rhetoric been there and continue until today.
I do want to develop more, go further into this subject, but we do have to get to Eric, and we still have about 5 minutes to answer some of our panel questions. But thank you so much for joining us today, and I hope you'll stick around for another 2 or 3 minutes when we answer some audience questions. I'm going to bring on Eric Navarro now, Director of the Middle East Forum's Military and Strategic Programs. And Eric, really quick, what can we expect from the Israelis militarily in the next 24, 48, 72 hours as we go into the weekend? What stage of the campaign are we at, and where is it going?
Well, to your earlier updates, they're going to systematically dismantle the regime's ability to produce nuclear weapons, but also then seek to degrade and destroy their combat power. To the previous statement about why there's no uprisings and what they're waiting for, right? They're waiting for the tipping point. And the tipping point will come once they realize that the regime has no ability to put any uprisings down. How do you do that? You target their ability to execute violent attacks against their own people. So I expect that to happen over the time, especially if it continues over 2 weeks. Although I don't think we'll actually get to that point.
Okay, thank you, Eric. Now we're going to invite all of our guests into the studio. Now we have to figure out how to do that, but hopefully this hanging MEF banner will go away eventually. And we're going to take some audience questions. And first we have from Martin, and I'm going to leave this open. Maybe we'll get this to either Shukriya, or we'll get this to Michael. Having shut down the internet in Iran, how is the leadership communicating? Shukriya, I'm going to go with you.
Yeah. Because we work in that line, how to connect all these groups together in Iran during the Women Life Freedom Uprising. We had that chance. My group was the group that we delivered the first stalling to inside of Iran. I'm talking about that information because it's public. RGC already have my name in that blacklist, so that's a public information that I lead all this stalling to inside of Iran. So right now, we unfortunately the stalling that we had access to them, some of them because for the 2 years we didn't pay the subscription, the internet was good. So now we're trying to reconnect them. because all they connected to the US. We voted here, and all we can reconnect this. Starlink is the first internet access we can have. And because if you ask me about the Kurdish and Baluch and Azeri region, it's easy to communicate because people knowing each other for years. There has been mobilization, the grouping, so it's easy. For the Tehran and other part, I can tell you there are always ways people can communicate. If you ask me about the political activities and that kind of the mobilization or communication, if we're talking about the civilian or the family from abroad and inside of Iran, unfortunately, there is no connection for that kind of communication.
Thank you, Shukriya. I'm going to go to Michael now for this one, which is about Reza Pahlavi. Francis asks, he seems to talk on social media. Can he be put forward as the head of a Democratic Provisional Council? Is there any connection in the Iranian army?
The good thing about Reza Pahlavi is he's the one figure that has a great deal of respect. The problem with, and so he could play a role in convening a constitutional convention, especially if he rules himself out of being the person endorsed by that constitutional convention. At the same time, his weakness has always been his organization and his organizational structure. He's had decades to try to reform and streamline his organization. He hasn't. Now, at this time of crisis, we will see whether it's too late for him.
Okay, we have a question from Abigail here, where she's asking us, what groups or exile opposition leaders is the Trump administration communicating with in the hope that they might assume a leadership role in Iran in the event of regime change? And what kind of support is being provided to those groups? Wynn, I'm going to go to you for a second here, because you've been reading a lot about the Trump administration's opinions, both those for and against regime change and sort of what's going on here. What are our writers saying about what the eventuality might be in terms of Trump administration engagement with those who are not the Ayatollah?
Less concerned with the details of what's going on within the West Wing itself and speculating about who's saying what about whom than they are urging, as Jonathan Spires today, for example, in a new article, arguing that regime change is the only way out of this, that otherwise Israel is going to get into a long war with Iran, which favors the Iranians over the Israelis. So they're, by and large, arguing that regime change is good. That's not across the board. There are others who are taking a different tact. Jim is one of them, for example. Jim
Michael, you had some thoughts on this.
Right. I mean, traditionally, the executive branch, the White House, has refused meetings with leading Iranian opposition figures. Many in Congress, however, have welcomed those meetings. And so Congress is actually becoming the battlefield, or will be the battlefield, for who gets American support. Various groups are going to be going door to door and have been going to door to meet senators, hoping that the person with whom they develop the relationship can amplify their message into the White House at this time of crisis.
I want to thank our panel, Michael Rubin, Director of Policy Analysis for the Middle East Forum, Eric Navarro, Director of Military and Strategic Programs, Shukriya Berdost, an Iranian-American Kurdish military analyst, national security analyst, and a great Kurdish rights activist, Winfield Myers, the editor of Middle East Forum Online, Gadir Marie, former member of Kinetic and the head of the Middle East Forum's Eastern Mediterranean Project, and Zanef Shaban, an Iranian-American human rights activist. Thanks to everyone for joining us today, and we'll see you on Monday on the next edition of the Middle East Forum's Iran-Israel War Monitor. Thanks, and have a great weekend.
Thank you.